Najma, welcome to the Knowledge and Resolution Hub. We're delighted to have you here and to have the opportunity to engage you as part of our Legacy Series. For the audience, I'd like to briefly introduce you and provide some context for the conversation. You are a medical doctor, qualified at McGill University in Montreal. You have a PhD with focus areas of surgical infections and sepsis. You've undergone fellowship training in trauma surgery and critical care in Toronto and in Michigan in the US. You are a subject matter leader and mentor in fact, mentor to many in trauma care and medical research, and a professor at the University of Toronto. That's, of course, in the Department of Surgery. You're also an advocate for Canadian doctors for protection from guns. I believe that's a non-profit group. And you're also a recipient of prestigious awards and recognitions, and I'm going to come back to that a little bit later on. In terms of your current role, you are the Chief of Surgery and Trauma and a trauma surgeon at St. Michael's Hospital. Incidentally, a fascinating facility, and I believe that's been established for over 130 years or so. In our Legacy series, Najma, we try to explore the individual journeys of individuals, and there's really three things, right? One is in terms of what they've achieved, also what they've given back, and the prevailing context really is individuals that have been positive role models. The first part of this journey is often very fascinating, and I'd like to explore this with you a little bit further. So I believe in the early years, and some people I guess call it the toddler years, that period took your family and in fact yourself from India to Pakistan and then to Scotland before Canada came into the picture.
Thank you for having me, Arif. It's really wonderful to be here. And yes, not a lot of people know that about me. My parents were both born in India before the partition. They were married in Karachi. And I am the oldest of three siblings. I happen to be born in a small village where my father's ancestral home is in Ara, Bihar, because my parents were visiting my father's ancestral home, and I came a little bit early. I came prematurely. My parents then moved from Karachi to Scotland, where my father finished his PhD at the University of Glasgow. My sister was born in Karachi, and then they lived there for a time. My father was very, very focused on academics, and these years in Scotland, I think, were quite pivotal in defining our family's ultimate journey.
Yeah, I mean, certainly a big move to go from Pakistan to Scotland. I'm sort of curious, what was Dad's PhD? What was the topic of his PhD, and how long were you in Glasgow for?
The area of my dad's study was psychology. He was a social psychologist, and he wanted to understand how individuals are influenced by the norms and ideas of the society around them. We lived in Glasgow for about 2.5 to 3 years, and then we made a big move to Sudbury, Ontario. In fact, my dad defended his PhD whilst he was in Sudbury because they wanted him right away once he accepted the job. My dad's interest in education and academics was a main driver for our move to Canada. He was very interested in the opportunities that could be afforded his family because of the move to Canada.
Oh, I mean, I'm just thinking about Sudbury, certainly a town that's renowned for mining and lakes. In fact, I think when I last looked, there's about 300 lakes, if I'm not mistaken, in Sudbury, and also science centres. How did you end up in Sudbury?
Yeah, well, bear in mind now we're 5 because my youngest brother was born in Scotland, and so the 5 of us moved together. My father was offered a job as an assistant professor of psychology at a North American university in Canada, and that was his dream. We remained in Sudbury as a family for about 23 years. I did my grade school and my high school in Sudbury before going off to university.
So I'm going to come to that university part a little bit later on, but I'm interested in the role of your mother, and I'm thinking the family's now pivoting, if I can use that term, different geographies with dad and three children. How was this for mum?
Yeah, it's a great question. People who know my mom know that she's a rock star. She really is. And for starters, it would be important to remember that my parents were the first generation of immigrants in that early phase of immigration from South and East Asia to Canada. They really were trailblazers. Never an easy journey, but there were many rewards, I think. If you would speak to them, they would tell you. Both my parents were very strong people and somewhat focused on a little bit different things. My mother instilled in me the discipline of hard work and to understand my responsibility to others. My father instilled in me and all three of us, the three siblings, a love of learning and to be ever curious and to want to pursue knowledge just for the sake of knowing things. They both instilled in me a love and dedication to our family and, in fact, to the whole human family. Dad was a very dedicated Canadian until his last final days. Sadly, he passed away last year. He's very proud of his children and very grateful for the opportunities afforded to us by this amazing country. And of course, a big theme in our family was always the idea to be in service of others whenever and whatever the opportunities presented to you. This idea of notion of service to others, to our community, and to all of humanity was a big theme for our parents always.
Yeah, I mean, incredible. I have to say, incredible vision of mum and dad. And I'm now thinking a little bit about Najma, right? In the sense that what was, the aspiring Najma like? I mean, when did medicine come into the picture? And is this something you wanted to do at an early stage? And in particular, were there any particular blocks in you, not just achieving your dreams, but of course your aspirations too?
Yeah, I think if I remember this correctly, I wanted to be a doctor from a very early age, probably from my school years. I loved science. I was curious about biology. I was quite good at it. A bit of a nerd, I think, and so that fit. I would say that life was not always easy, as it is for many immigrant children, and so I maybe hid away in my books a little bit. My father taught us that seeking knowledge and the passing on of knowledge were very noble pursuits, so I was always motivated by these ideas. In terms of blocks, sure, there were lots. There were many. Lack of access to formal academic networks. My father was an academic, but as a recent immigrant, he didn't have access to a lot of those hidden networks. I had lots of high school teachers, or at least a few, who just didn't think I had it in me to become a doctor. But I would say at the same time, I had a very supportive family, and I did have lots of teachers who encouraged me. It's a bit of a lonely journey to become a doctor, lots of hours in the library, just you and your books and your pencils. I think in terms of aspiring, Najma, I think I was very driven. I loved to learn. I rather enjoyed student life. It was mostly fun for me, and I understood very early that adversity creates opportunity. The journey was going to be hard, but I was not going to be deterred. I was focused then, as I am now, on getting things done, on achieving things, small things and big things, and giving back. And my family is and always will be my rock and my North Star.
And you mentioned university. I'd like you to take me through that university career, leading to you completing your residency in general surgery, and then, of course, progressing to go on to achieve and obtain your fellowship.
Yeah, it's a bit of a long journey. It was a long journey, Hara, for sure. 4 years an undergrad in physiology at Western, and then I moved to Montreal to begin a master's degree at McGill. And after about 2 years, I was accepted into med school, and just about the same time, I transitioned into a PhD program. And so I accepted the offer to medical school and transferred and completed my PhD while I was a first-year med student. And then I completed 6 years of general surgery residency training, 5 years of clinical training, and a year of research training focused on sepsis research. And then finally, I did 2 years of fellowship training, a year in trauma surgery and a year of critical care at the University of Toronto and the University of Michigan.
Wow, Najma, that's a long time. So that's, if I'm not mistaken, around 17 years of education and training after completing high school to your first job. Is that right? About 17 years or so?
Yeah, it's about 17 years. I try not to think about it too much, but yeah, it was a long journey.
So that really is, sort of incredible dedication and you mentioned the hard work and of course and focus. But when you look back, and I imagine there were many people, not just in academia, but of course in your workspace, that encouraged you to keep sort of moving forward and pushing to succeed.
Yeah, I was really fortunate to have incredible mentors and supportive friends and family, and even today I have an incredible network of really special people around me, lifelong friends and colleagues who I reach out to frequently, and of course my family. I would say also, the medical community, and in particular the academic medical community, is also kind of like a family, and they have also been very encouraging.
So success, I guess, makes it necessary for one to have an ecosystem around one. And I think you mentioned incredible people and incredible journey. One thing that did strike me, and I was curious, you ended up in Toronto after many years in Montreal and McGill. What brought you to Toronto?
Interestingly, I had a job offer at McGill, and I was very seriously considering it. I also had a job offer at the University of Michigan. But then I really wanted to be closer to my family. I really wanted, after being away for so long, I wanted to be close to my parents, close to my siblings. I had a new nephew at the time. That was also a big motivation. And I wanted to be at a teaching center and a trauma center. So I was offered this incredible job at St. Mike's. We were then just in the formative early stages of setting up a rigorous trauma program. One did exist, but bringing the rigor and the excellence to it was what they were working on then, and I thought it was a great chance to be part of something very new and progressive. I'm proud of the trauma center that we have built over the last 20 years. It's really quite incredible. We are one of only 3 programs outside the United States to achieve accreditation status, verification as a level 1 trauma center out by the American College of Surgeons, and this is a very prestigious distinction.
I'd like to know a little bit more about that. St. Michael's Hospital journey. Incidentally, I was sort of looking at it, and I believe it's one of only 2 level 1 trauma centres in Greater Toronto, and the other, of course, being Sunnybrook Health Sciences Centre. I'd also like to know more about your association with the University of Toronto, and in particular the Department of Surgery there.
Yeah, I think about it, it's been about 20 years since I started, and I joined the faculty at St. Mike's. As you say, we are one of 2 adult trauma centres in the Greater Toronto area, the other being Sunnybrook. The Pediatric Trauma Centre is, of course, the hospital for sick children, and we are now a collaborative University of Toronto trauma system. We collaborate on academics and educational initiatives, etc. I started at St. Mike's as a trauma surgeon and as a trauma team leader. I've also been the trauma medical director, and I am now the chief of surgery. My academic interests have always been in the area of surgical education, and I was the residency program director for general surgery for about 8 years, and I'm now the vice chair of education for the whole Department of Surgery at the University of Toronto, and also professor of surgery at the University of Toronto.
Yeah, that's fabulous. I'm trying to piece this together now, Najma. I'm seeing demanding career. I'm seeing a demanding world in a broader sense, and of course, personal commitments, and this within the context of time limitations. How do you bring it together? How do you balance all of that?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot actually, and I would say it's constant and iterative and ever-changing calibration as your demands of work and the needs of your family and your own personal needs ebb and flow. I endeavor to prioritize what's important, and that interestingly changes as you go through the various phases of your life, right? those sorts of things. Everything seems important when you first start your career, and then you learn to develop an eye for what's actually important and going to move the needle. And I always ensure that I create time for my family and well-being. And it's important and essential to have a great team around one, and I'm fortunate to have a great team around me. I think also it's important to remember that leadership is about leading by example, and taking care of oneself is so important, and other people see that. It's very important. I would also say that for me, balance doesn't come in a day. I don't have a particularly balanced day every day, or a week, or even sometimes in a month. And after a particularly busy time, I intentionally put aside time for myself and for my family. And if I'm coming into or anticipating a particularly demanding time at work, I block off time in my calendar after that period so I can recharge. And this is something I've become more adept at as my career has progressed. I walk a lot. I like to walk, and even during the winter months, I have lots of warm clothes, lots of big puffy coats, and I try and walk in the winter even for 20 or 30 minutes just around the neighborhood when I get home. I spend time with my family whenever I can. I've done Pilates for about 10 years. My brother has a cottage, and we like to spend time there as a family. I like to spend time in warmer climates in the winter, so we sometimes go to Puerto Vallarta, one of my favorite places on earth. And this year, when the new year began, I committed to trying new things. So a friend and I took rock climbing lessons recently, and that was a bit of a blast. I would say that TV and social media are really time sinks for me, and I probably indulge in both of them too much. It's something I'm trying to change, and I sometimes feel like I'm succeeding, and sometimes I feel like I'm not.
Yeah, and that's awfully difficult, right? I mean, I guess when one tries to keep current and one tries to keep relevant, then you have a tendency to watch those things, and I hear that a lot. I hear that quite a lot. So other than that, day job, and what's your passion, Najma, in terms of, how does that passion sit in with, you mentioned making Canada a better place and making Canada stronger. How does that all fit in for you?
Yeah. I believe in Canada. I'm a very proud Canadian. Certainly, it's not perfect, nothing is, but if you really look at it in a very dispassionate way, Canada is one of the best countries in the world. We need to continue to work on reconciliation with our Indigenous peoples, and we need to continue to distinguish ourselves. And I think now there is a time to seize on this opportunity to distinguish ourselves on the global stage as a modern, multicultural, strong democracy, and that we love peace and that we will work for peace. Canada has a strong public education system and a public healthcare system, and we have a very strong human rights record. It's not perfect, it needs work, but we can put the work in. We enjoy a high literacy rate. We have a higher than average life expectancy than many economically developed countries. But these are things that we have to invest in and strengthen, and particularly in this increasingly complicated world. A literate and healthy citizenry is essential to a healthy society. In this arena, I think we can be a leader on the world stage. I am the co-founder of a not-for-profit organization called Canadian Doctors for Protection from Guns, and we established that the turning point, I think, was the mass shooting on the Danforth in 2018. And this event started a national conversation with many people who treat trauma patients, emerge docs, trauma surgeons, psychiatrists, pediatricians, about something that we were seeing. We were all seeing this uptick and increase in gun violence in our hospitals. And we formed this organization together. It's a national organization to raise public awareness about gun violence, to advocate for more public investment in education, to address the barriers and traps set by social determinants of health, and also to advocate for stronger firearm laws, including a ban on assault-style weapons. The Danforth shooting and the activities of this organization have garnered a lot of national attention. Treating victims of gun violence is a visceral reminder for me that of the devastating impacts of gun violence, not just on the individual, but these are often young people, and so for their families and for entire communities. It's become clear in my work and doing research and talking to other advocates that we needed a public health approach to this crisis, and I really couldn't remain silent, knowing what I know and seeing what I see. I think we're going to see positive change, and these things are achievable. We can have a better Canada for all Canadians.
So, advocating for stricter gun laws, of course, contains challenges, right? And how do you navigate that pushback? And you are on record as saying people think that when someone gets shot, they either die or recover and move on with their life. But the reality is so much harder. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, it's not easy being an advocate, and interestingly, it seems so logical, but there's always going to be someone who takes an opposing view, and the complaints and personal attacks can be very draining. But I remind myself that this work is about saving lives and doing good. It's about serving the greater good and serving our patients and our communities. I know what matters, and I felt it, is the support from my family, my friends, and my colleagues, the medical community, and these things keep me grounded and motivated. I'm fortunate to have had a lot of that support. The public health science is very clear about the harms, about the proliferation of guns, and the U.S. serves as a cautionary tale, and we should really take heed and take note of the situation in the U.S. In terms of my comments on the record, it simply means that often these are young people in the prime of their lives, and their lives really are never the same. They often spend weeks and months in the hospital, have many operations. There are mental health impacts. Their families are fragmented. Guns are meant to kill and maim people, and so they don't harm just a little, they harm a lot. And the tragedy is really that so much of this is preventable. Canada can do better, and I believe this is what the majority of Canadians want.
So on that thematic of giving back and lifelong learning, I think, as you mentioned earlier on, I understand that you are currently doing research on the use of competency-based framework in surgical training, resident wellness, and also the duty hours of residents. Could you expand on that a little bit, and in particular, why would this be important to you at this stage of your career?
Oh, it's so important. It's so important because we are training the next generation of surgeons. The stakes are really high. These doctors are going to be taking care of you and I, and our families are, so it's really, really important. Ensuring competence and even more so excellence is essential to the health of our populations. As the world changes and technologies evolve, we are always looking for better ways to educate surgeons and keep them current throughout their careers. This is something that we have to instill in them, this idea of lifelong learning and being ever curious.
You've many distinguished recognitions, but your work on the postgraduate surgical program and the educational side certainly struck me. And I know and I'm aware that you are the recipient of the prestigious Royal College AMS Donald Richards Wilson Award. I believe you, if I'm not mistaken, you achieved that in 2016. Is that right?
That's right, about then, yes.
What's the key? If you could summarize it for me, what's your key to your success, and how you how one becomes a positive role model, and in particular, to those who may be listening to this, what's your message for those who wish to follow your pathway? And we spoke about your upbringing, and we spoke about your education and career and commitment to that. What would you say to people who want to or who aspire to follow that pathway?
Yeah, so there's a few points here. Let me highlight a few things. First of all, I think it's really important to stay curious and really committed to lifelong learning. It's essential, and this cannot be replaced. And this is really about internal drive. No one can sit themselves down and learn that material. You've got to have that internal drive to know more and to be curious and understand the world around you better. Never ever underestimate the power of collaboration. Great things are only done in collaboration. For example, the work of Canadian Doctors for Protection from Guns is a national effort that includes physicians and students and residents and paramedics and nurses and public health scientists, and each of these hundreds of people make important contributions to our efforts all the time and to the national discourse on gun violence. There's no success, no matter how big or small, without a continuous improvement and a commitment to hard work. So my secret is hard work, work hard, repeat, 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 repeat. And it's honestly not much more than that. It's just being able and wanting to and understanding that all important things require hard work. In some ways, one has to learn to enjoy the solitude of work, but also have a love of collaboration. You've got to hone very astute team skills, because in any team, sometimes you're the leader and sometimes you're the follower. And you have to be astute and competent in all those roles and the many sub-roles in between. A great leader is only great if they can fall back and sometimes follow someone else. That's how great things can happen. Leadership really is about service, and the rewards will come at the most unexpected time, tenfold usually. And if they don't, you've got to understand that those rewards were meant for someone else. I think also very importantly, as we advance in our careers and acquire more influence, it's our responsibility to use our voice for those who cannot advocate for themselves. I really do believe that we're all here to take care of one another. That's the whole point of this complicated journey called life, and I really think it's important that we look after one another.
If I may say so, Najma, that's a very, very compelling message. And on that theme of taking care of one another, family, of course, is very important. And I know that your daughter Isa will be listening to the podcast. How has she been part of this journey? And I'm very interested. What in particular is the advice or best piece of advice, if I can put it that way, that she has given to you?
Well, when I think about it now, she really is the whole story, and she's been with me the whole step of the way. These past 20 years, I could not have achieved the things I've done without her understanding and her support. At this point, it's really up to me, and I'm trying to open up the world for her so that she can see how amazing and fascinating the world is, but at the same time how complicated and sometimes disappointing the world could be, and what our role is in trying to address some of those things. My job now is to help her find her place in this complicated world, to help her find her purpose so that she will be able to achieve her aspirations. In terms of the best piece of advice that she's given me, I think it's a variation of that Shakespearean, those Shakespearean words, to thine own self be true. That is, listen to your inner voice, listen to your gut. But at the same time, be prepared to be wrong, because sometimes we get it wrong. It's only human.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as we finish off, fascinating journey. I would say incredible focus, and without doubt exemplary achievements. I'd like to thank you for your contributions and of course your service. I'd like to sort of welcome you to conclude the podcast with any concluding thoughts or observations.
Well, first I'd say it's been a real joy to be here with you and have this conversation with you. And I think for anyone listening who's thinking about the things they want to do, I would say that thoughts have kinetic energy. And no great or amazing thing was ever achieved without first the thinking of it. So first you've got to conceive of where you want to go. The journey will probably be winding. It won't be a straight line. It won't be as you anticipated. But first, at least think big and bold.
Najma Ahmed, thank you very much.
Pleasure.